Super7 went to the past and brought back something prehistoric. Here's your look at the new Super7 Transformers Ultimates Grimlock. Me, Grimlock echoes for miles as one of the most powerful and feared of the Autobots calls out. The only challenge beyond Grimlock's capability is using basic pronouns, but despite this, Grimlock can take on even the mightiest Decepticon any day of the week. This 9-inch highly articulated Transformers Ultimate Grimlock Dino Mode figure features Generation 1 accurate paint deco and an arsenal of accessories that even include time as a waiter. One great thing we've been waiting to tell you is that you'll also get Autobot Wheelie, his friend. He can ride on Grimlock's back, ready to go on the attack. Action, not diplomacy, is Grimlock's forte, so in his spirit, just add this mighty warrior to your Transformers collection. Those pesky Decepticons better watch it, or they're gonna get dinosaur. That was terrible. Before, of course, we get a closer look at the Transformers Ultimate Grimlock. Let's grab the tape measure and see how tall the figure stands. I ended up finding this one over on Entertainment Earth. If you guys would also like to follow the same footsteps that I found this guy, you can also click the link down below in the video description. That same link, by the way, will not only give you the chance to grab Grimlock, but also as well, that link will save you 10% on anything that's currently in stock. Promsies. The figure, though, stands about 9 inches in height, or Grimlock's going to stand about 23 centimeters tall. Now, truth be told, I don't have a lot of Transformer Ultimate figures from Super7 as of right now, but I do have one. That is the leader of the Decepticons. Here's what Grimlock looks like in Dino mode compared with the leader of the Decepticons, Megatron. The Dinobot's leader does do pretty good for himself when it comes to accessories. Some of the things are things you probably could see yourselves displaying him with. There's other things I might not see myself displaying him with, but either way, the figure comes included, first of all, with a tray. The tray is in one episode only where Dinobot Grimlock is serving up drinks to, I guess, all the patrons around him. It's basically just molded here in a gray plastic. It's depending on which way you'd like to have it. I suppose it probably will go up this way, and then you have the outer rim of the... I would imagine it'd be this way. But then you get all these little things that can go on top of these tiny little glasses. Now, most of the glasses are purple. Just happens to be the case that you get one blue one, but all the other ones are purple. I looked back on the episode, and sure enough, there was one blue kind of glass goblet, if you will, and all the other ones remaining were just purple. So they were fairly accurate with that, and he actually can carry this around. Now, he does have what I would imagine to be proper hands for holding these. Now, he has these kind of like hooked hands that basically will just hook underneath the saucer, and you can carry it around like that. Now, what I ended up doing also as well is that I gave him the flat hands. Now, the flat hands, you can also sort of makeshift this as well by just basically taking the saucer and clipping it in between his fingers. He can also carry around the serving tray that way also as well. So there's a couple of different ways that you can display it. If though you did want to change out the hands are actually pretty easy. First of all, you get these flat, relaxed hands, which again, you can have them just basically in a relaxed pose or state like this. But if you wanted to, you just wiggle the hands and remove them from the forearms, just like that. Take the hands that we wanted to use. Maybe we'll, you know what, I'll bring back in those hooked hands here for a second. Just plug those in place. The exact same thing on the other forearm also as well. And you can just plug that in. And then again, you're just going to take yourself the saucer, and the saucer basically just clips in between, basically just in between those hands. Honestly, it's not the easiest thing. I found it was a lot easier, in fact. If I can get that in there, get that in there. In fact, it was a lot easier to just have the relaxed hands holding the saucer instead, or the dish instead. Then, of course, the other hands that he also comes included with are probably my favorite of the hands. So basically just like these hook hands. Not so much hooked in a way that they're going to be holding a saucer, but hooked in a way that he's going to be tearing through Decepticon bodies. Again, just to change out the hands. I know we've already done this already, but we'll do it one last time, promise. And then we'll move on to the rest of the other accessories. Fairly long pegs, too. So they'll just slide into the provided holes. Do the exact same thing on the other side. Oh, there we go. And again, we got Grimlock just with his regular hands. Now, he does actually have some pretty decent articulation, more of which we'll get more into in a moment. But we'll just put Grimlock down here for a second. The figure also comes included to carry along that saucer. The figure also had at that time in the episode an apron. Here's one problem I have with the apron. If you go back and look at the episode, this, by the way, just wraps around his body. He's got Velcro closures to go around the waist, and then it's also got a Velcro closure to wrap around his neck. So basically all you do is just wrap this around Grimlock's head, meet up the back there with the Velcro, and just when the two Velcro pieces are together, of course, you've got that all good to go, and then you're just going to take the side straps, and you're going to strap those also around as well. The problem with this, though, is if you go back and look at the episode, Grimlock's apron, I'm not going to be a stickler for detail, I'm sorry, but the apron actually goes down here, and then this bow tie is actually attached to his neck. It's not attached to the apron. I don't know if just Super7 missed that insight, that one little detail, of course, but yeah, the bow tie really should be attached to his neck. It shouldn't really be anywhere on his apron. Unless there was that one little split second where Grimlock's just walking along and then the animation studio behind the scenes that made the cartoon just happened to put it in the wrong place. But most of the time it's usually sitting there, I think, around his neck. We're going to detach this for right now. Now, I did do the review, of course, of the Simpsons Moe. My Moe didn't come included with an apron. So what I could always do, I mean, it's not really the most cartoon accurate apron that Moe would have, but at least I'd have a stand-in till eventually I get my hands on the accurate apron. On to the rest of the figure's accessories. Grimlock comes included with a big giant fish. Now, to put that in perspective, I mean, how big Grimlock is compared to a normal human, this fish would be giant. It's nicely detailed. It's mostly cast here in sort of a more of a bluish gray plastic. You've got the fins there on the sides, the mouth there on the front. It looks like he's breathing. It probably won't be breathing much longer. And of course, they painted the eyes also there as well. A nice little fish. I mean, of course, you can take, like, for example, the gripping hand here. You can clip the fish tail kind of around his hand, and Grimlock can carry it around like that. Or I guess he can kind of carry it around like that. But you kind of really need to use both hands in order for him to do it, unless you kind of just, I don't know, maybe balance the fish across his hand that way. But it's not going to stay in place. You really do definitely need to have two. The other accessory that the figure comes included with is the helmet that he has in Grimlock's New Brain, which I think is from Season 3, guessing Episode 24. It was back in like 1986. But the notable thing about that episode is the fact that Grimlock gets inherently a new intellect. And he then uses that intellect to build Computron. So like the helmet itself would then sit on Grimlock's head. You basically want to fit it on like that. And it fits on pretty well, in fact. It kind of sits on with friction. And then eventually, when he transfers over his intellect to Computron, this is the part that basically just mounts onto Computron's front of his forehead, and Grimlock transfers over his intellect that way. I mean, without really having a big giant Computron head right here, it doesn't really have a place where this just attaches. So unfortunately, while it's a good idea to come included with the helmet that he has, there's really, again, no place to store really or have a place really to display this. This is going to be dangling in front of the figure's face. One thing I'm sure I'm probably going to be displaying, though, with Grimlock is he also comes included with a crown. Neat Grimlock King. Molded fairly well, in fact, actually, in a yellow plastic. It just basically fits over top of Grimlock's head. The square parts, so if you look at it from the front, like the wider part will go basically the back of the head, and the more narrow part will sit on the front of his face. And basically just clips on like that. It's not as frictioned necessarily as Grimlock's New Brain's helmet, but it fits pretty good still on Grimlock's head. The last of the accessories that come included with the leader of the Dinobots, we're just going to spin this guy sideways, is that the figure also comes included with Wheelie. Unfortunately, they've made the same mistake that Hasbro made when they released their version of Grimlock. Their Grimlock, granted, could transform, but it had the same problems with their Wheelie, is that Wheelie sits basically on the top of Grimlock here. Basically just take him and wedge him on the top like this. Or I guess it probably makes more sense to have him a little bit further up like that. The problem with it, though, is that there's no real posability on Wheelie. I mean, he's fairly detailed, really, for the size that he is, but he only has just straight swivels for his legs. He has at least ball joints for the arms, and you can also rotate the hands, and you can rotate, I think, also the head. It's just a little bit tighter on my figure. But unfortunately, though, you really can't have him standing on his own. And this is both something now that Super7 and Hasbro have done wrong, but not just including additional articulation. I mean, obviously, most people are probably going to be picking up Grimlock to have Wheelie posed on top of him. But I would really love the chance if I could have had just a little tiny Wheelie, because it's very unlikely that we're going to be getting a posable little Wheelie of that size. Why would they just have not thrown in the articulation? Ball joints at the tops of the thighs, if anything. So at least you could have brought the legs down, and then I could have had little tiny Wheelie, whether he has the slingshot on or not, which unfortunately he doesn't. I'd love to still been able to have the figure displayed just standing. And again, he can't accommodate that. He only just has, again, swivels and ball joints in his arms. That's basically it. But basically, yeah, it just sits on. I had him a little further down, but I guess it makes a little bit more sense. Him further up on the top, he basically sits on that little ledge, that ridge of plastic on the top of Grimlock's neck. And I guess that's one way of having the figure displayed. So that's all the accessories that come included with Grimlock. Getting, though, now a closer look at the figure. You know, for what it is, it's a Dino version of Grimlock, so obviously it's going to go without saying that the figure doesn't transform at all. But he, you know, again, he looks pretty good. He looks like Grimlock from the cartoon itself, and he's surprisingly fairly articulated, too. The plastic that they've used matches that of the cartoon, so he's kind of got more of a medium gray for the majority of his body. There are a few areas, like for, unfortunately, his legs, where it's not quite the same coloring, and it's not even really the kind of plastic either. It's more of a smoother, shinier plastic for the majority of his body, and yet his legs are kind of more of a matte gray. You know, again, I love maybe if they could have found something in the middle and maybe made this a darker color, but maybe made this more of a matte finish instead of a shinier finish. He does have the tail on the back of the figure's body. There's actually some posability there, which I was really surprised. I just expected this to kind of be attached in place with no movement whatsoever. But happy to see that there's actually some tail articulation too. Now the head sculpt is again looking quite a lot like Grimlock. You can open and close the mouth, and inside he does actually have a little section where he can pew pew shoot lasers out from inside his mouth. The tops and bottoms of his teeth are nicely sculpted here in a medium gray, and again you've got the coloring on the eyes there in blue. No illumination at all, but I guess the colorings of his eyes are bright enough that maybe he could have made this just a tad bit brighter so it would look like it would glow. He's got the Autobot symbol there on the front of his chest, some panel lining both in the red, and the majority of his body, in the undercarriage at least, has the yellow on the ends of his feet and the backs of his heels there as well. So all the accurate colors Grimlock had in the cartoon carried very nicely over here to a Super 7 release. The thing about it, though, is while the figure is really posable, I ask myself this question, and it's probably asking, many of you are probably also asking the same question, is now that you have a Grimlock like this that you can pose, what do you do with him now? He doesn't transform, and I know I've always been a big advocate when it comes to non-transforming Transformers. They don't always have to transform, they just have to look good on a shelf. Okay, taking my own medicine, now that I've got this guy displayed and sitting on the shelf, what do I do with him? He's basically just going to be a posable version of Grimlock, which does look nice. I don't know, I just feel like, as good as he does look, and he does look really good, I just don't know necessarily what I'm going to be doing with this. Like, what's my long-term strategy when it comes to these Super 7 Transformer releases? I'm just going to ultimately have these guys displayed on the shelf, as I was being, or have continued to do with the other Super 7 Ultimate figures. And I guess for that, Grimlock's a good-looking figure. I guess it's just the fact that looking at him like this, maybe unlike Megatron, because he's in an alternate mode, it's almost as if, like, if we were just to slide over Grimlock here and we bring back in Megatron, it's almost as if we got a gun version of Megatron. I'm like, yeah, it looks like Megatron from the cartoon when he's transformed into the gun, but now what do I do with him? In a way, I kind of would have liked maybe a robot mode of Grimlock, but to be honestly, though, fair, most of the time in the cartoon, Grimlock is usually more a dinosaur and less a transformer. So I guess in that sense, he's not going to be in robot mode. He would make the most sense, really, to be displayed like he is displayed right now. Conflicting with my opinions, let's look at the figure's articulation. First of all, the head is on a ball joint, so it moves really quite easily. I mean, up, down, back, and forth, and technically you could rotate it all the way around. The figure's mouth, we've already discussed, does open and close. He has also a secondary ball joint at the base of the neck, so there's rotation there as well. This part of the body actually does also rotate all the way around. I don't feel like it is an actual ball joint, as it doesn't have a movement up and down. It doesn't certainly sway back and forth, so I think it's just a straight swivel. The arms, though, on the other hand, are on pin and hinge joints, so you can easily bring them out at 90 degrees. You can also take those arms and rotate them all the way around. The figure has just a single hinge in the elbow, which allows at least the forearm to rotate, and you can take those hands and rotate them all the way around with articulation there as well. The back of the legs do rotate back and forth. They're on hinge joints also as well, so you can bring them out for a wide stance on Grimlock. Or again, if you want to have them a little bit closer together, you can also do that as well. The figure does have a hinge joint that allows the leg to move forward, but also move back there as well. And there's also some additional articulation that you can rotate the lower leg of the dinosaur. Front and back are the legs, or front and back, I should say, are the feet. And there's also a hinge there on the back of his heel that also moves back and forth there too. The tail also is something that moves. And unlike the front, the tail at least seems to have a ball joint. So you can actually have him wagging his tail back and forth. There's also an additional articulation on the end of the tail that seems to be, like this part, on a ball joint. So some really decent articulation on this figure. I guess the thing about it, though, is, again, like looking at this figure, let's just get everything straight and how he's supposed to be. At the end of the day, I mean, he's delivering what he should really be, a really posable dinosaur version of Grimlock. And I guess to that, I'm going to slide over once again and bring back in the only other Transformers Ultimates figure that I still yet to pick up, Optimus Prime. Compared along with Megatron, it makes probably a little less sense. If I had myself, for example, a cartoon version of Optimus Prime, that would make a lot more sense. I could see myself, still getting more into the Transformers. But again, it's just sort of a strange thing with Dinobot Grimlock here, in the fact that he is in a dinosaur mode. You know, again, for being a posable figure that doesn't transform, he looks the part, he fits the part, but there's just something a little off about him, just the fact that obviously he doesn't transform. And I know that's exactly what we're getting here with the Super 7 Transformer Ultimate figures. We're getting ones that look more like the cartoon. They don't have to transform, and they have a lot of posability to them. Grimlock, in that sense, does check off all the boxes. But again, like when I'm posing this guy on the shelf, I'm going to be essentially asking myself the same question as you probably have asked yourself if you pick this up for yourself, is what do I do with him? He's just literally going to be a figure that I'm going to be putting on the shelf. I'm accepting, obviously, of other figures that I just simply pose and put on the shelf, but I feel like with Grimlock, I needed to have more. Maybe some of it had something more to do with the articulation. Maybe it had more really to do with the accessories. The accessories are things like, I'm never going to really display the figure with the tray, never really going to be displaying him with the apron. Maybe I might do the actual helmet on top of his head, because that's a notable episode. That's the episode, of course, he makes Computron. Or there's always the option, of course, of making, of course, him king. That's a great option available as well. But at the end of the day, it's a good-looking Grimlock. I just don't know where I'm sitting when it comes to this line. I sit more comfortably, it seems, obviously, with Megatron, just because, again, like, it's Megatron the way he looks from the cartoon. Grimlock does look like that as well. I guess I'm just being a little too hard on the Dinobot leader here. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I am just being a little too hard on Grimlock. At the end of it, all the other Super 7 Ultimate things that I've been collecting, whether it be G.I. Joe, Thundercats, Silverhawks, Ren and Stimpy, even Simpsons, the whole plan in mind for Super 7 was the fact that they were wanting to make these things look cartoon accurate. And for that, Grimlock is cartoon accurate. He doesn't transform, and I suppose he doesn't need to transform. He's just a big, bulky dinosaur that you can put on the shelf. He has enough accessories, I think, to be justified. I mean, obviously, with him not transforming into a robot, giving him a sword and giving him a blaster make no sense whatsoever. So they sort of had to beef him up with other things that could be pulled from the episodes. So like, for example, the Grimlock's new brain, I think would make the most sense. The crown would make the most sense. A saucer, a tray with some goblets, and even an apron, even though the placement of the bow ties in completely a wrong spot. I mean, really, my only thing I would still say is a bummer about this release is the fact that, once again, like with the Hasbro release, Wheelie is limited on articulation, and it shouldn't be the case. If they had, say, forfeited the fish, and with the amount of the additional materials they could have used for ball joints on the tops of Wheelie's thighs, giving him some additional articulation, a posable Wheelie, I would have been for that, much more for that, than giving him a fish to carry around with him in his hand. But what do you guys think of Grimlock? Let me know down below in the comments section. And have you been collecting any of the Super 7 Ultimate figures? Doesn't have to necessarily be Transformers. What's the kind of thing that you guys are collecting right now? I mean, I have sort of been tempted to get into the Power Rangers space, and that's kind of still the same idea. I wanted to get a Dragon Zord, but like, a Dragon Zord isn't going to transform, it isn't going to merge with a Megazord. It ultimately is just going to be a posable looking Dragon Zord, similar to my complaints initially for Dinobot here, Dinobot Grimlock. So really, these figures are just supposed to be posable characters that you're putting on the shelf, and at the end of the day, I guess that's not a bad thing at all. He's just going to be taking up a lot more space than Megatron, and ironically enough, I think this guy is actually still selling online for the same price as the leader of Decepticons. So it goes to show, like with the case when we looked at Buzzsaw from Silverhawks, that some of the figures may be a little bit more justified the price. Like Grimlock's a lot of plastic for the price, and maybe Megatron didn't get as much. Maybe he's a little smaller in stature, and that's probably one of the reasons why he got as many accessories as he did. Again, if you guys are interested to get Grimlock for yourself, I did find this one over on Entertainment Earth. You can click the link down below in the video description. That link will not only take you to Grimlock, but also as well, you can use that link to save 10% on anything that's currently in stock over on their site. Let me know again if you guys have been collecting the Transformer Ultimate figures, and if you enjoyed this video, want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you certainly would like to stick around for more, we are, by the way, going to be looking at some more Super 7 stuff, so if that's the kind of thing you'd like to come back to this channel not only for those Super 7 reviews, but the other things I'm going to be looking at as well. Of course, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.